I stand?
You're going to stand on this side. I'm going to stand on this side.
And then that's where we're going to be.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah, and I'm in recovery for addiction and trauma.
And hello, everybody. My name's Curtis. I'm an addict and alcoholic, and I'm the pastor of recovery here at Community of Hope Church.
Hi, Curtis. All right.
We just want to take a quick minute and just acknowledge Vance and Christine Carpenter. Those guys have just been so wonderful throughout me coming in, so welcoming, and the leadership that they've shown by not only encouraging us to become leaders, but to make sure that we were doing it when we were healthy. To me, that has been such a reward, because when I walk into the rooms of recovery, I expect to meet somebody like Christine and somebody like Vance, people who accept you, people who love you, and people who only want to see the best in your life. So could we just honor them one more time, please?
All right, I'm going to get us started on our couple's testimony. So as a child, I was anxious and had trouble making or keeping friends. I would spend time with just a couple of friends, but usually was sent home early from sleepovers or not invited back for lack of social cues and seeking attention, usually through staying up all night and being loud. I felt I lacked attention and began seeking it through guys at a young age. I was also introduced to porn at the age of 5 and continued in this addiction for decades, causing lasting emotional and relational trauma.
Yeah, and when I was growing up, I found myself split. I got good enough grades to get by. I, however, had problems with behavior. So I was left out of certain events that required good conduct marks. Sometimes that even led to me not participating in sports, which is why I wanted to get good grades. I was able to make friends, but as I matured, I found that I was insecure in social settings. So I began to read people and did what I felt people either expected of me or what I thought they would find amusing. This led me to using alcohol and smoking weed in excess as a way to gain a feeling of security with the friends I had, as well as to personally cope with my insecurities and anxieties. I also found myself beginning to push the limits of the morals I had been taught as a child by beginning to skip school and sell drugs.
I discovered alcohol at the age of 12, and I used it for many years as a way to cope with my pain, as well as to fit in and stop feeling so awkward in group settings. I considered myself a casual drinker, if that's a thing for a kid. I continued to seek attention from guys and felt that their attention was filling the emptiness of love that I was seeking. This led me to marrying at the age of 20 to a guy in the Army and moving to Kentucky. We had trouble from the beginning and were in couples counseling, and I was seeing a therapist. After just a few months of marriage, my husband said that I was not getting better, and I needed to see a psychiatrist. So he drove me 2 hours to the psychiatrist and said if I didn't leave with a prescription, he wasn't driving me home. So I began taking lithium and finally understanding that I was able to regulate my emotions rather than be controlled by the impulses to react to triggers. When this brought about change, now too quickly, I came home from work one day to discover that my husband had left me. We had been married for less than a year. This began a very heavy drinking for me as I sought to escape my pain, rejection, and loss of dreams. I then began dating without care or consequences and found myself in a relationship with a married man. We moved together to Georgia, and I thought this was the one, the knight in shining armor, who was going to fulfill all of my lost dreams. After many ups and downs, that same man became my abuser. First, just when he used drugs, and then all of the time. I moved to West Virginia with him in hopes that things would get better, but I was wrong. By the end, I was in such a dark pit of destruction that even the sunshine seemed dim, and I stayed in a drug-induced fog while being locked in the basement and abused. God rescued me from this pit through audibly speaking to me one night at 2 a.m., and he told me to run, Sarah, run. So I threw my dog in the car, and with the last couple of $100 to my name, I drove back to Florida. Soon after getting into Florida, I was then involved in a 5-car pileup on I-95 and left unable to walk, have no car, no job, and no way to do anything for myself.
I began drinking early. I started at 11. This is also when I started to smoke weed. In the beginning, I felt like I had complete control over my use of alcohol and drugs. Actually, for the first several years, I still felt like I had self-control and that my self-will was strong enough to stop at any moment I wanted to. My excessive drinking and smoking, therefore, and my occasional use of cocaine and pills was just merely a filled desire to use them in such a way because I liked them so much. Then I started selling weed because I thought it was financially smart. And I deserve a seat here. I knew the people who used it. I knew people who could provide it to me, and I wouldn't have to pay for what I wanted to use anymore. But the double life was very tiresome. I was competing in soccer and traveling all over the state and country with my team. I would travel to Coral Springs and Fort Lauderdale for practice Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Then, when I got home, I would go to parties where I would drink and smoke. I didn't think about the consequences and wasn't concerned that this life could lead to something that would become out of control. Mostly this was when I was in high school, where I became known as the party animal. So before graduation, I always had school and soccer keeping my partying in check because I wanted to be good at both. But when I graduated, the scales tipped real quick, and I no longer had school and soccer to ground me to accepted responsibilities. Meanwhile, I also lost a relationship to my girlfriend. She was the love of my life at the time, and I lost her due to using hard drugs and not listening to her request for me to stop. Also, because I was taking her relationship for granted. The sum of me having my ego shattered, using drugs, not needing to limit my use because of school and soccer, allowed me to fall into a state of heavy drug use and selling those hard drugs, which resulted in my physical dependency to these drugs, which were opiate pills. I soon began to consistently get arrested with possession charges and other crimes that surrounded my drug use and addiction. This led me to begin my attempts at geographic fixes. So I moved from Florida to Michigan, Michigan to Florida, Florida to Michigan, Michigan to Florida, and then Florida to Colorado, all in an effort to escape myself. But every time I moved and everywhere I went, there I was. Throughout that time, I ended up in jail in every county and state that I lived in. I also ended up homeless in those states. I had many attempts to get clean and sober, but those attempts were always on my terms, under my conditions that I wanted. Needless to say, they were always short-lived and unsuccessful. Ultimately, before recovery, I could not stop using. I refused help. I could not accept the love my best friend was trying to show me by buying a bed at a halfway house, and I gave up on trying to do what was right by getting clean because I felt that God didn't want me to be anything but a criminal and an addict. So I accepted the worst lie I ever told myself and embraced the life I had been trying to escape for the past 8 years. Only 2 short weeks after this acceptance, I ended up in prison for robbing banks. It was inside that I would end up beginning my active recovery journey.
I attended a women's salad supper when a woman from the stage was talking about this program for any hurt, habit, or hang-up. I had never even considered recovery before, but I knew everything in my life was completely out of control and I was willing to try anything. That Monday, I came right here to celebrate recovery and learned that there are other people who understand what I have gone through and that I am not alone. That week was also the beginning of a step study. This is an in-depth study of the 12 steps done in a small group over the course of 9 months. Between the Monday meetings and the step study, I learned that I also needed to go to other meetings. My stinking thinking was not only 2 days a week. I also learned to trust people again, learned how to set boundaries, and that even if people have different stories, they can still have the same feelings as me. And most of all, that I am loved and lovable. I worked through the steps with my sponsor, who is someone who did the steps before me and showed me how to do it. She was actually the first person who truly showed me the love of Jesus and forgiveness. From my past, I had been taught that my worst moments defined me and that I do not deserve forgiveness. But part of my program is to share wholly and honestly. So after a really bad relapse, I told her what had happened, and she just looked at me with love and asked me, "What is the next right thing you can do?" rather than shaming me or telling me everything that I did wrong. It was the first time that I finally was able to accept Jesus' forgiveness for me and accept forgiveness from other people. Even though it took me several attempts to get sober, Celebrate Recovery taught me to never give up and not stop before the miracle happens. My love and relationships was another area that took me longer to recover from. I had several failed attempts at relationships, took a year break, and continued to work on myself without focusing on relationships. The boundaries that I set, that I was not available, helped me not to be distracted by different other relationships that would present themselves. This time helped me to not let my emotions drive my decisions and learn how to value myself and know that I am worth protecting from abuse and not settling for less. I used accountability partners to help me stay with these boundaries even when a relationship did present itself.
That's right. When I was inside El Paso County Jail awaiting trial, I was offered the opportunity to go to AA meetings that were offered by the people who brought meetings in. I began going because I thought it would look good for a judge to see that I had begun going to meetings voluntarily, and because I knew I had a problem. I didn't know what the rooms were all about except to control drinking and drug use. So I went simply because I knew that what I had been doing wasn't working. I didn't know if I would do everything those people did inside, but I was at least going to give it a shot. When I went to the meetings, I found that after I left, I always had a lot to think about. I had a lot of questions, but was too embarrassed to ask until I wasn't, which Christine alluded to. I picked up two main things from those meetings: don't drink and get a higher power. I wasn't interested in Jesus because of the way the media portrayed Christians in general. I felt at the time Christians were either picketers telling everyone who walked by that they were going to hell, or they were corrupt hypocrites that judged everyone else, even though they were worse than the ones they were judging. So, after several months, I began praying to the all-good creating energy of the universe. Because I had been familiar with the negative world I created, I wanted to believe in something good. The people in the rooms accepted me as I was and encouraged me to pursue the life of sobriety that I wanted. As I was transferred from county jail to DOC, I saw that the encouragement I was getting from the people in AA transferred to the rest of my life. I became confident and enthusiastic about life in a way that, up until then, I thought was lost to my addiction and alcoholism. I began growing into the person I had wanted to be. I began exercising, reading, and writing, and had peace consistently. I wasn't so tied up with the worries I had going on, but instead learned to think of and to hold on to a gratitude list. My whole demeanor changed for the better, so I kept going to meetings no matter what facility I was in. I was released early because of good time and earned time because I went to college inside and was a part of a program called SWIFT, which is State Wildland Inmate Fire Team. So when I was released, I was sent back to Florida where my mom and stepdad very generously allowed me to come home.
Prior to meeting Curtis, I had been praying that God would allow me to meet someone who loved Jesus and was nonviolent. Those are very basic. So, he fit the bill! For me, the Sunday that we met was like every other Sunday, and our mutual friend that was always introducing me to his friends and family over the years. So when he asked me to meet another friend, I said yes. But as I got closer, I realized how hot he was, and I could not look at him. So I literally brought over my deaf friend so I could do sign language with her and avoid eye contact.
I want her to tell it again. So, When I came home, my family and friends threw me a welcome home party at Du Bois Park in Jupiter. My friends came and brought their 2 daughters. I remember them giving me a Bible and a book marked with $50 and said, "Now you have to open it." It was there they invited me to go to church, which is Community of Hope. He told me about Celebrate Recovery and invited me to see his daughter sing in the choir. It was the first time I went to church as a willing adult, which was Sunday, March 11th in 2017, when he introduced me to Sarah. I remember him saying, "Hey, there's someone I want you to meet," and he called Sarah. He said, "Sarah, come over here." And there she was, the most beautiful woman I could imagine. I remember thinking, if I could end up with someone like this, that would be so awesome. But there's not a chance in hell a good Christian, beautiful girl like this would ever go for a criminal addict living with his mom fresh out of prison like me. But it would be nice. It was just a few short days later when my friend called me, inviting me to go to the Rapids. And he was playing hookup right here, and he said, "Hey, you remember that girl Sarah I introduced you to?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Well, she seems to think that hanging out with you isn't such a bad idea."
Which I did not say, for the record.
And I was like, "What?" I actually wrote that.
Yes, you did.
So I ended up being able to go. It was on St. Patrick's Day, and after the Rapids, we went back to their house for tacos.
Because that's what you do on St. Patrick's Day, eat tacos.
Sarah brought her grandmother, Gaga, and I talked with her that whole night.
With my grandmother, not me.
Yes.
Because I had not had a healthy relationship before, it was more important than ever that I use the tools that I learned in recovery and my accountability team. The boundaries that I learned about, I now needed to put into practice and keep updating them as things changed. So when we first started talking on the phone, my accountability challenged me that we were talking too much. And that much talking was old behavior that I had done before. So we stopped all phone communications and began exchanging letters. Aww. This gave us the opportunity to still get to know each other without spending every hour on the phone. I also had been taught to live above reproach, which means to not let people think something is happening that shouldn't be. For instance, I was remaining celibate until marriage, so that meant not living together before marriage. Even when we were engaged, we had a house that we were renting that I lived in for a month, and then I moved out the week that we were getting married so that Curtis could move in. When I would visit his house, I would need to call my accountability partners to let them know that I had left and only be there when we were not alone. We were not perfect, but we did manage to stay pure until marriage. Yeah. Wore a white dress. Yeah. It was really important to me. This really helped us focus on our relationship, Jesus and recovery before our physical. And this has helped tremendously in our marriage. Here.
So, in a great act of mercy and grace, Sarah let me have her phone number when I asked her for it while staring at the cement outside of her van when she dropped me off because I had to get home for a curfew. When she gave me her phone number, she was very firm. She said, "Do not call me or text me after 10 p.m., ever." We began speaking frequently, but I was not allowed to see her outside of the church property unless it was at a Bible study, which I made sure I went to, or at CR. So we did not go on a date or even begin dating for a month. In the beginning, Sarah allowed me to take her to a Dunkin' Donuts where she began literally interrogating me about my past. I did not know that she had a friend from PBSO pull a background check on me and cross-reference everything I said on that report. But
I'll let you know my friend later.
that's right. But because we had begun talking and texting so much, her accountability told her that she should tell me that we were not allowed to speak on the phone anymore. So if I really wanted to talk with her, I was to write her letters. So I did. I would write her a letter every day about the things that were going on with me. I was so excited to give them to her, while being extremely embarrassed at the same time. I had never gone through anything like this for a woman without ever having kissed her, but I knew she was worth it. We did that for a couple of weeks, which I thought was a couple of months, up until like a couple days ago. We began dating on Easter. Dating Sarah was great, but it was extremely challenging for me because I had never dated anyone while sober. I was beginning to go through different emotions without the regular coping mechanisms I was used to, like drugs and alcohol. I also didn't know how to navigate a relationship with sexual boundaries. But we would go to meetings at CR, AA, and NA throughout the whole time we were dating. These meetings helped me grow as a person so I could handle a new way of dating. Recovery was and is a core part of our relationship. Then, a little bit into our relationship, we started having a date night where it would be literally just me and her. We would talk about our love languages and I needed to take into account of what she needed. And previously in relationships, I had been very selfish. So learning all of these new ways to be a part of a relationship became overwhelming for me at times. All of this was leading me to think about our future together, but I couldn't confess the love that I had for her. I remember one time I told her, my mom's dog, Shotzi, that I loved her right in front of Sarah. And Sarah was like, "What? You love the dog but not me?"
Happened.
I, however, learned in recovery to tell on myself when I was feeling overwhelmed. So I did. I didn't know what to do with all of these feelings for Sarah and thinking about the future because I couldn't say I loved her. I was scared of what might happen. This led me to reach out to a counselor. I began speaking with him about why I felt I couldn't say I love you to Sarah and how this was causing me great pains. One thing he helped me realize was that I was telling myself a lot of lies from my past and applying them to our future. So, after a short time of meeting with him by myself as well as with her, I embraced the reality that I loved her and I began preparing my proposal. I asked permission from her parents and I asked her to marry me. Just 3 short months after I proposed, we were married.
Because we were going to stay pure. So it's important.
Let's go.
Gotta get there. Follow us on Facebook. Though we did a great job with boundaries to set us up for a great marriage, we still brought a lot of baggage to the table. I've used accountability partners in my sponsor, made phone calls when we were not quite doing things right, or when we're in a full-blown fight and I need to cool off and get another perspective. We have also gone to couples counseling, and I've also done personal counseling. Using each of these resources has helped our marriage not stay stuck in a rut or feeling hopeless when a situation doesn't go the way that I want it to. Specifically, on our honeymoon, we got in this crazy fight, and I was so upset. And I was letting my past dictate our current reality rather than seeing the situation at hand. I had started to fold and stop standing up for myself. We decided from that fight that we needed to go back to counseling, and we did. Overall, I never thought that marriage was something that you did in community, but through recovery, I've learned that I get to learn from the wisdom of others. I do not need to accept unacceptable behavior, and it is not weak to apologize. I have learned that in a fight, I can stop and pray and also move towards my husband rather than away, because he is not the enemy. I can certainly see how the healing that I received by doing my inventory in the 4th step has helped clear away a lot of my hurts, hang-ups, and habits from my past so that I can see my husband rather than overreact, seeing other past similar situations and compounding those feelings. And by doing my 10th step daily moral inventory, I get the opportunity to see where I need to make amends on that day and continue to grow closer together rather than further apart after a disagreement.
Yeah. We have been married for 3 years, and so much has happened. Not only with life events, but within our personal marriage. I brought a lot of baggage to our relationship. I had expectations of what I thought would happen with us being intimate, and I did not voice them. After a while, intimacy became harder and harder for us, and I grew more and more frustrated. I didn't want to understand what was happening. I just wanted it to be different. I wanted it to be the way that I wanted it to be. I remember one time we were having an argument, and she began telling me about something that happened to her in her past. And I said, I didn't want to hear about it because it was too hard for me, that I loved her just as she was now. I didn't realize that that comment made it seem like I only loved her for who she was now, and that I didn't love all of her, the whole Sarah. Also, my selfish and self-centered nature would show up in our day-to-day life. I remember we were in an argument one time because I had been up for a while, but she wanted me to come lay in bed with her. I felt like I was getting a lot done around the house, and I didn't want to stop. This made it seem like I was rejecting her, and I felt like she was trying to control me. I called my sponsor, and he said, "What's your problem? Go lay down with your wife. What's more important, doing something around the house or being with your wife?" It's amazing how a sponsor can bring things into perspective. But it was in these smaller arguments where I learned to call my sponsor that developed the muscle of picking up the phone. Since then, we have had some trying times with pregnancies. I didn't really know what helplessness felt like until I couldn't be with my pregnant wife who was in the hospital during COVID, and I couldn't be with her. In those times, I did what my training and recovery told me to do, and I called my sponsor. I called my accountability. I went to meetings, and I prayed while I also had others pray for me. I stayed sober throughout those times when I felt helpless, so that when I had the opportunity that I could be helpful, I was most helpful. Previously, when things got crazy, I checked out mentally and typically made the situation worse. Recovery has given me the ability to be there for my wife and family when they need me most.
I thank God that I found recovery and that I get to work my program each day. It has helped me to live life on life's terms. Right now, we are carrying a baby girl who has the potential of not surviving. My blood work shows a positive result for a condition which is no survival rate. We are continuing to pray for God's grace and peace for whatever happens, trusting that He knows what He is doing and has a plan, even if it's not what we plan. I have learned to live one day at a time and truly take one moment at a time, accepting the hardship as the pathway to peace. I have experienced complete peace through working the steps of recovery. I'm no longer haunted by PTSD flashbacks. I no longer feel this great heavy weight on my chest that seems suffocating, and no longer have to feel like everything around me is completely out of control. I have learned that what I am able to do and what I am not, and I do my part.
Looking at my life now, I am so grateful for recovery. It was recovery that led me to Christ, and Christ has given me the strength to work recovery so that I can navigate life on life's terms while having peace. Jesus said in John 16:33, "I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world." And I believe him. Right now we are navigating troubles of all sorts, but my training and recovery tells me that I can choose to live in the troubles that I face or the reality of the blessings that I experience. Looking at my life and where I was, what happened, and where I am now, I can say with full honesty that God's will is good. So I choose to live in the hope of God's goodwill while navigating life with the recovery tools I continue to learn. As it is, I can only do it one day at a time. Thank you for letting us share.